If there's anything that the Scottish and today's hipsters can share in common, it is that they have both proven that you do not have to match to look pretty cool. So today I'll be wearing both the clergy tartan, which you all gifted me with last Sunday, as well as the McLeod Loud tartan to celebrate my college ancestry at the College of Worcester in Ohio. So these are the colors here today. We will continue on this month with which I promised is some challenging scripture reading for the next few weeks, with the sermon series entitled Sing with New Eyes. Today we pick up in chapter 25 of the Gospel of Matthew, verses 1 through 13. Let us listen for God's holy word. Jesus said, "Then the kingdom of heaven will be like this. 10 bridesmaids took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish, and 5 were wise. When the foolish took their lamps, they took no oil with them, but the wise took flasks of oil with their lamps. As the bridegroom was delayed, all of them became drowsy and slept. But at midnight there was a shout, 'Look, here is the bridegroom, come out to meet him.' Then all those bridesmaids got up and trimmed their lamps. The foolish said to the wise, 'Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out.' But the wise replied, 'No, there will not be enough for you and for us. You had better go to the dealers and buy some for yourselves.' And while they went to buy it, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went with him into the wedding banquet, and the door was shut. Later the other bridesmaids came also, saying, 'Lord, Lord, open to us.' But he replied, 'Truly I tell you, I do not know you. Keep awake, therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour.'" This is the word of our Lord. Thanks be to God. If you attended elementary school with people you felt were like yourself, take one step forward. If you have visible or invisible disabilities, take one step backward. If your family had health insurance as a child, take one step forward. If you ever felt passed over for an employment position based on your gender, ethnicity, age, or sexual orientation, take one step backward. If your work holidays coincide with religious holidays that you celebrate, take one step forward. If you have ever felt unsafe walking alone at night, take one step backward. If you were born in the United States, take one step forward. If there have been times in your life when you skipped a meal because there simply was no food in the house, take one step backward. If English is your first language, take one step forward. As I was participating in this classroom activity during seminary, I started to notice that while I was slowly moving forward, my classmates, my friends, those who I shared an apartment with and cooked meals with, and laughed and prayed with, many of my friends were no longer side by side as when we started this activity. Many of their steps were not forwards, but backwards. there was now a chasm between us. On this day, in this moment, back some 10 years ago in the wintry days of Chicago, I realized that much of what I assumed to be normal in the world and what I took for granted was in reality not the same normal for everyone else. This simple classroom activity helped us all in this class to realize that many people in the world do not live with the same opportunities and privileges, much of it because of the color of one's skin, or their gender, or their ethnicity, or their sexual identity, or physical ability, or religion, or any number of characteristics that make us who we are. We notice this while also acknowledging that we are all in graduate school together. And so if this is true of this small class of postgrads, how vast is the chasm between myself and the people I come across on the streets, or even beyond that, those people I may never meet in my life. I was awakened to white privilege and systemic racism. Stay woke is a slang term that has been used in many different ways over the past few years. One may hear it in songs, see it on social media, or even say it amongst friends as a bit of a joke. It can simply mean to stay awake. But there is another usage of the term that may be a bit more provocative to many of us. Stay woke is used as a watchword by many within the Black Lives Matter movement, meaning to remain aware of the social and racial injustices going on in the world today. To stay woke can mean to remain vigilant against the oppression of systemic racism, police brutality, and outright white supremacy. As I participated in these conversations and this class back in seminary, as I watched the videos and heard the voices of those who were fighting to be heard concerning the daily injustices of living as Black Americans in the U.S. today, I was challenged in ways that I never knew existed within me. I'm not a racist. I love all people. I would mutter in my thoughts as I heard such stories of injustice. But I realized this was not the complete truth. And as I reflected more on my actions, and particularly on my inactions, I began to realize that maybe I was not as innocent of the privilege and racism that these voices for justice were talking about. I wonder if these types of questions and this uneasiness ever came across the hearts and minds of proud Americans as many of Scotch-Irish descent sought to make the United States home during the 19th century, only to find that in many towns they were not welcome. This message was communicated verbally and physically to many of the very same ancestors we celebrate today. I wonder what many people thought and said when Oregon became a state in 1859. Oregon was not a slave state, but not a free state either. Oregon's laws made it clear that it was a no black state. And those who were black and found themselves in Oregon were subject to public whipping every 60 days until they left. What does it mean to be a Christian in a world surrounded and enveloped by daily injustice, violence, and oppression? What happens when we realize that we are benefiting from such injustices in the world today? Last week we read in the Gospel of Matthew about the paradoxical teachings of Jesus as it relates to his understanding of leadership and what it means to be a disciple. As he said, in order to be the greatest, you must become like a servant, and that the first shall be last, and the last shall be first in the kingdom of heaven. In chapter 24, Jesus spoke with his disciples of the apocalyptic times and visions for the people of Israel. And today, Jesus continues with this theme as he describes the kingdom of heaven in these opening words of chapter 25. So we pick up with verse 1 where Jesus shares with the disciples a parable. Now, parables are stories that are meant to communicate a larger truth. But the direct meaning is not always apparent. So let's take a look at this story of the 10 bridesmaids and see if we can decipher some sort of message there is for us today. Jesus continues in his teaching, and if it helps with this metaphor at all, if you're not up to date with this idea of using lamps and trimming wicks, perhaps your cell phone is a good metaphor. Think of using your cell phone to light the way in the darkness as you await the coming of this bridegroom. So verse 2, 5 of them were foolish and 5 were wise. Okay, so we know that we're going to be taught about 2 different groups here in the way we live in this world. There is the foolish way and there is the wise way. Which one would the reader or the disciples or even us here like to be if we're aspiring towards a story? Any for the foolish? No? Maybe. So some of us are from the wise, right? So think about what it means to be wise in the world today. Verse 3, when the foolish took their lamps or their cell phones, they took no oil or perhaps an extra battery or charger with them. But the wise took a flask of oil with their lamps. It's pretty straightforward, huh? Just like how we're reminded to pack before going on a long day's hike, we remember the Scout motto, be prepared. As the bridegroom was delayed, all of them became drowsy and slept. But at midnight there was a shout, look, here is the bridegroom, come out to meet him. Now this is a little interesting, right? Why was the bridegroom delayed? We can think of any reason for a groom to be delayed in the actual story itself. He got lost perhaps, or cold feet. Maybe his transportation didn't show up. But we also need to be thinking about this from a larger perspective if we're contextualizing the story here today. If we take on the mindset of our author of this book, Matthew, who is writing to a Christian audience perhaps 30 years after the death and resurrection of Jesus, why would he write about a delay? Perhaps it's because most of the immediate readers were wondering this very question. Hey, it's been several decades now, and here we are, still living under the oppression of the occupying Roman Empire. What's going on here? Where is this Messiah who is supposed to come down again from heaven and save us? In fact, both chapter 24 and 25 can help better explain taking such a perspective in these stories. And then we go to verse 7. Then all those bridesmaids got up and trimmed their lamps, and the foolish said to the wise, give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out. But the wise replied, no, I will not be able to have enough for you and for us. You had better go to the dealers and buy some for yourselves. how do we prepare for the coming bridegroom or the coming Messiah? Perhaps those bridesmaids were prepared. Those were the ones who lived their lives, who acted in preparation for the kingdom. Perhaps that is how he recognized them, and did not recognize those foolish bridesmaids who were not prepared. Keep awake, therefore. Be prepared, for you know neither the day nor the hour. We are called to keep awake. I know I say that as you're slumping in your pews here on a Sunday morning. We are called to be awake, friends. And if the idea of being prepared is in fact associated with actual daily living that helps realize the kingdom, and the Messiah will recognize us, the church, the bride of Christ, by our works, then this is good news. The good news today, we are called to live as followers of Christ, awake to the injustices of the world, constantly striving to serve as agents of justice, reconciliation, and grace in the world today. And I see this alive and well right here at Valley Community. I see it in those who sought out justice in their military service. And I see it in the many years of partnership with groups like Luke Dorff and Second Home and Habitat for Humanity, the Bud Clark Commons, and the numerous other examples that you and I and this congregation have been so lucky to be part of, and that will continue to celebrate after church with our mission market today. Yes, we give money to many organizations who are on the front lines of the mission and ministry here in the city and around the world, and there are many here today who are right there alongside those who are serving on those very same front lines. We here at Valley have a wonderful tradition of mission and justice. It is part of the very fabric of our being. It is also part of our vision and purpose for today and for tomorrow. How is God calling us to help realize the kingdom here today? After all, as we celebrate the past, the fabrics that made us who we are, we look to the days in the future. We are a church of today and tomorrow. Today we celebrate the many blessings in our lives. Yes, we are all blessed in many ways, and I'm sure many of us have those privileges and blessings in our minds this morning. And what a privilege it is to share our blessings as we walk alongside those who do not experience the same blessings in this world. What an honor it is to live our lives as a reflection of the risen Christ, not pointing to our self-righteousness, but the righteousness of our loving Creator as we seek justice in the world today. We witness to the risen Christ as we stay awake, as we prepare our hearts, our minds, and our very lives to receive Christ in the world today and the world to come. Thanks be to God.